Welcome to the final module in our unit, Introduction to Management. In part 1 of the lecture, I'll be looking at the environment organisations operate in and introduce the impact that can have on organisations, particularly in relation to change and innovation. More specifically, in part 1 of the module, I will look at the different parts of the organisational environment and the forces that both drive and constrain or create barriers to organisational change and innovation, and the resistance with which people can respond to change. Okay, this is going to be quite long, so just bear with me. Let's begin by considering the external environment in which organisations operate. The diagram on this slide represents a common conceptualisation of the environment in which organisations operate. The external environment consists of the general environment, which is shown on the slide as the outer ring, and the specific environment, which is shown in the middle with the circles intersecting the organisation. The general environment are those parts of the external environment that affect all organisations. The general environment consists of the economy, the political legal environment, social cultural elements, the demographic environment, technology and the broader global environment. All of these elements in the general environment exert forces on the organisation which the organisation must respond to. From these general forces we can identify trends that can help organisations predict, to some degree, what they might need to adapt to in the future. I'll have a look at each of these a little bit more closely. Firstly, the economy. Most people that have watched or read any news will have heard mention of the economy. The economy refers to the financial conditions within the nation, such as interest rates or the costs of money. Sometimes economies are described as growing or healthy. In those economies, people generally have more money to spend. In static or shrinking economies, people often have less money to spend. So organisations might find it easier to make a profit and introduce changes and innovations in a healthy, growing economy compared to those where people don't have much money to spend. Perversely, those times, the ones where the economy is weaker, often exert more pressure on organisations to introduce changes. The political legal environment refers to the governments and the laws they make that organisations need to comply with. The social cultural environment refers to the culture, norms, customs and values of a country or nation, or sometimes a region within a nation. Social cultural aspects of the environment influence organisations through the types of products people want or the way they can buy products or services. For example, McDonald's, which offers extremely standardised food, does make small adaptations to the food offered in different countries to tailor to local cultural and religious beliefs. The demographic environment is characteristics of the people that live in a country or area, such as how old people are, how educated people are, or where people actually live. In Australia, demographic trends have been towards an older or ageing population, where people are more educated and tend to live in cities or urban areas. The technological environment concerns knowledge, tools or techniques that are used to transform inputs into outputs. In the past 50 years, the world has seen huge advances in technology, whether through the use of computers or mobile phones, or through services like internet banking. There are many examples of the ways in which the technological environment has changed the way business is run. One example is the DVD and video market that has almost completely shifted from a product sold in a shop to a streaming service where consumers purchase access to a streaming service like Netflix, where movies are available to be viewed for a period of time. Finally, the general environment consists of the global environment. Increasingly, all businesses operate in or are affected by the global environment, sometimes directly because they have offices, consumers, or outsource parts of their business offshore to overseas organisations, and sometimes indirectly as economics overseas influence the local economy or because international competitors move into local markets. The specific environment are those parts of the external environment that is unique to the organisation itself and influences day-to-day operations. The specific environment may also be called the task environment. The specific environment consists of public pressure groups that might also be called advocacy groups or special interest groups. These groups aim to influence the ways in which specific organisations operate. The specific environment also consists of customers that buy products or services that the organisation produces, can consist of suppliers, for example, the people that organisations buy paper to put in their printers, or for a car manufacturer, the company that supplies the metal that they make the cars out of. Finally, the specific environment includes competitors, which are those organisations in the same industry that sell similar products or services. For example, in the supermarket industry, Coles, Woolworths and Aldi all compete for consumers to buy groceries from them. The internal environment is concerned with those factors within an organisation that can influence the way people think, feel or what they do at work. Different aspects of the internal environment can include the organisation's strategy, which is a pattern in a stream of organisational decisions that focuses the organisation on what it wants to achieve and how the organisations plan on achieving those goals. Some generic organisational strategies might be growth strategies, where an organisation wants to expand the size of current operations or to diversify through acquiring or buying businesses in different business areas. Another generic strategy could be one of differentiation, where the organisation wants to distinguish its products from other companies in the industry, such as BMW and Volvo. Finally, another generic strategy might be focusing on cost leadership, where the organisation focuses on minimising costs. Another part of the internal environment is the organisational culture, which is the shared values, principles and traditions in the way things are done in the organisation. Organisational cultures can be strong, where people in the organisation share values intensely and widely, or organisational cultures can be weak, where people do not share values as intensely or widely. A strong organisational culture can mean that people in the organisation are much more loyal and committed to the organisation. Organisational culture can be found in the stories, rituals, symbols or language used within the organisation. For example, eBay awards given at a conference build symbols, rituals and stories about what it means to be a seller for eBay. Within the organisation, there are all the people who work within the organisation or the workforce. These people vary in terms of a whole lot of different categories like age, gender or education. The makeup of these categories changes. For example, the poor economy has meant that some people cannot afford to retire and so keep working, which has led to a workforce with increasingly large numbers of older workers. The internal organisation environment can consist of equipment like computers that people use to do their work, or in agriculture there are machines used to prepare or plant fields. Finally, the internal environment can include the attitudes of the employees, such as how happy or satisfied employees are with the workplace. Both external and internal environmental forces drive organisational change. With organisations facing an increasingly complex and uncertain environment, an organisation's environment creates both drivers for change and innovation as well as barriers to change. The LMS page for this module has a table showing drivers or forces for change stemming from the external and internal environment. These forces for the change correspond with different parts of the external and internal environment we looked at on the past two slides. So, for example, organisations need to change the way their organisation operates when there are changes in the specific external environment, like when they have new competitors. For example, Woolworths and Coles have faced pressure from the relatively new competitor Aldi. Organisations may also need to introduce changes if there are changes in the general external environment, like if the government introduces new laws. Changes in the internal environment can also require organisations to change policies and practices. For example, purchasing of new inventory software that requires training staff to learn how to use this new equipment. Change and innovation are inextricably related. Change can cause innovation and innovation can cause change. So what's the difference between change and innovation? Change is different in a state of affairs related to different points of time, while innovation is something original and new being introduced. The external and internal environment can create pressures on organisations to change the way they operate, but they can also create pressures on organisations to be more innovative. There are some internal environmental conditions that have been identified that can specifically stimulate and nurture environment, and there's a diagram on the learning management system for this module that outline those variables. Specifically, organisations that are flexible and adaptable with a high degree of communication, a culture that supports risk-taking and conflict and provides job security and creativity is more likely to have an internal environment that supports innovation. So while the external and internal environment creates pressure on the organisation to change and innovate, there are a number of challenges and barriers that can make it very difficult to manage change and innovation. The degree of uncertainty in the environment can make it difficult for organisations to know how or when or even what to change. The degree of environmental uncertainty also plays a crucial role in driving innovation and change. A high degree of change and complexity in the environment requires organisations to adapt and respond in order to stay in business. In contrast, stable environments with little complexity allow for predictability, which creates minimal pressure on organisations to change. However, stable environments can become uncertain very quickly. Two views of change reflect different degrees of environmental uncertainty, the calm waters metaphor and the white water rapids metaphor. The calm waters metaphor assumes a more stable environment, while the whitewater rapids metaphor is consistent with a dynamic and highly uncertain environment which demands continuous change from organisations. Increasingly, all business face dynamic, complex and highly uncertain environments. This has led to an increasing focus on innovation as a means of managing dynamic change. Changing the way an organisation operates or introducing innovations to meet pressures from the environment can be resisted by the people who work within the organisation. This is such a major challenge and barrier that I'll look a bit more closely at this on the next slide. Another challenge to changes in the organisation is the tension or stress that change puts on employees. In uncertain environments with lots of changes, task demands can change frequently, and organisations may require the numbers of staff to be reduced in order to reduce costs, which can lead to longer working hours, greater and more unrealistic workloads, and that in turn can increase the stress levels for employees. Increased stress reduces their productivity levels and can impact on the well-being of employees. As mentioned before, a challenge associated with managing change and innovation is resistance. People resist change when faced with uncertainty, when our habits or routines are disrupted, when people fear losing something, or when they don't agree with the changes being proposed. Resistance can lead to organisational silence, where employees are afraid of saying anything about workplace problems, and it can also lead to cynicism, where employees lose faith in the leadership due to previous unsuccessful change efforts. Understanding resistance can help to manage resistance better. On the slide are a number of techniques that can be used to manage resistance. Education and communication refers to making sure that employees are appropriately educated and communicate with about proposed changes. This approach can help if resistance is from misinformation, as it clears up misunderstandings, but it may not be possible to use if there is low levels of trust in the organisation. Allowing employees to participate and involve them in change plans gives people the opportunity to help design and implement plans. This is a valuable approach when the employees resisting have some useful expertise to contribute, and when the acceptance of employees is necessary for implementation. However, participation can make the change process more time-consuming. A facilitation and support approach provides support to employees during periods of change through listening to problems and complaints and providing employees with encouragement and training. This approach is helpful when employees' resistance is due to fear and anxiety and can help employees to adjust. However, it can be expensive and does not guarantee that resistance will be successfully managed. If there are powerful groups within the organisation, then negotiation might be a good approach, as this can buy commitment. However, negotiation can potentially cost a lot and can set a precedent that others might use to apply pressure as well. Another approach to managing resistance can be manipulation and co-option, through covert and secret attempts to influence people through selectively releasing information to some employees or structuring events in favour of desired changes. This approach might be used if a powerful group's endorsement is needed and can be an inexpensive way to gain the support of people. However, this approach can backfire and lead to a loss of credibility. Finally, organisations can use explicit or implicit coercion. Employees can be threatened with undesirable consequences for resisting plans, which can also be a cheap and easy way to help gain support from a powerful group. However, this approach may be illegal and can also lead to a loss of credibility. In summary, organisations often operate in highly uncertain and complex environments that drive the need for change and innovation. Consequently, managing change presents challenges for organisations. This brings us to the end of part 1 of our Module 11 lecture.